I have spent 20 years learning to live with a silence that never truly quieted. There are nights when the air in my house feels heavier than the walls themselves, nights when I hear echoes that are not really there, nights when memory and grief sit together like old companions. I used to think time would soften the loss, smooth over the sharp edges, maybe even let me breathe again. It didn't. It only taught me how to function with an empty space carved permanently inside my chest. My name is Rowan Hale, and 20 years ago, I buried my son. That night started like every other. I made tea I barely tasted. I sat by the window listening to wind roll through the dry fields. The house was dim, lit only by a small table lamp that cast long shadows across the room. I should have been sleeping, but sleep rarely came easily anymore. The quiet was familiar, almost routine. Then the phone rang. At first, I didn't move. The old landline on the wall had not rung in years. I kept it connected only out of habit, maybe out of superstition. The first ring startled me. The second made my heart climb into my throat. By the third, I stood, unable to understand why my hands had suddenly gone cold. The small screen lit up with a name I had not seen since the world stopped making sense. Caleb Hale, my son's name. For a moment, the room around me faded. I stared at the screen, as if staring long enough would make the letters change. My son's number had been disconnected 2 decades ago. His phone had been returned to me in pieces, water damaged beyond repair. I had placed it in a box I never opened again. The phone rang again. My hand moved on its own. I lifted the receiver with fingers that trembled so hard I could hear the plastic tapping softly. I tried to speak, but sound wouldn't come out. All I managed was a thin breath. For the first few seconds, all I heard was static, not normal static. It was uneven, layered, almost like wind passing through metal. Then came the breathing. Slow, shallow, human. Someone was there, listening. My throat tightened until it hurt. "Hello?" The voice was quiet, strained, barely more than a whisper. But I would have known it anywhere. A father does not forget the voice of his child. Even after 20 years of silence, it came through the line like a memory forcing itself alive. I closed my eyes. My knees weakened. I gripped the counter for balance. Caleb, the name, caught in my chest. I spoke it as softly as I could, as if speaking louder might break whatever fragile connection had formed between us. There was a pause, a trembling inhale. Then a voice that did not belong in this world anymore said, "Dad, can you hear me?" I felt something inside me collapse. My vision blurred. The room swayed. "Caleb, where are you? Tell me where you are." Another pause. A soft exhale. He sounded afraid, confused, lost. "I don't know. Everything is dark. Everything is wrong." The call crackled so sharply I pulled the phone away for a moment. When I pressed it back to my ear, the voice had changed. It had become thinner, harder to decipher, as if drifting away. "I don't have much time." The line hissed. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "Caleb, talk to me. Tell me what happened. Tell me how you are calling me." He breathed heavily, the sound broken by static, and then said something that froze me entirely. "Dad, they didn't tell you the truth." Before I could ask anything more, the line crackled violently and went silent. Not a click, not a fade. A silence so complete it felt unnatural. I stared at the handset as if it might ring again right away. My hands shook. My heart was racing so violently I could feel it in my throat. I checked the call log. The number matched exactly. The call lasted 9 minutes and 21 seconds. 9 minutes. From a number that should not exist. From a voice that should have been gone forever. I stood there until the lamp flickered and went out, leaving the room in darkness. Outside, the wind rose, carrying a faint hum that sounded almost like static. For the first time in 20 years, hope and terror moved through me at the same time. Because if that voice was real, then everything I believed about the day Caleb died was about to unravel. And I had no idea what waited on the other side of the truth. By morning, I had not slept a minute. The sky outside had softened into a pale gray, with thin streaks of sunlight trying to break through. But inside, everything felt dim, as if the house itself understood something impossible had happened. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by old photo frames I hadn't touched in years. Pictures of Caleb as a boy, his awkward teenage smile, his graduation cap held too loosely, as if it would blow away. I ran my fingers across the frames, tracing the thin layer of dust that had settled over the years. It struck me that dust is what time leaves behind. Dust and silence. I told myself the call couldn't have been real. The world does not bend like that. The dead do not speak, and yet the tremble in his voice, the fear, the way he said "Dad," it all lived in my ears, as vividly as the day he last spoke to me. I pushed the photos aside and went to the room I had not entered in nearly 2 years. Caleb's room. The door creaked softly, as if even it remembered him. The air inside was stale, untouched, and the faint scent of his cologne, something crisp and earthy, still lingered faintly, like a memory refusing to fade. The room was exactly as he left it. Books stacked on the desk, maps pinned to the walls, a jacket slung over the back of a chair, his old compass sitting quietly on the nightstand. I picked up the compass. Its metal was cold, and the needle trembled even though I hadn't moved. That tiny vibration sent a chill through my chest. It felt wrong, unnatural, as if the compass were reacting to something I couldn't see. "Caleb," I whispered into the empty room. My voice sounded smaller there, swallowed by the weight of years. The last time I had spoken to him was the morning he left for that research trip. He had stood in this very doorway, with a backpack slung over one shoulder, excitement shining in his eyes. He'd always loved exploration, not the kind that took you to new cities, but the kind that led deep into the earth. He'd once told me, "Dad, the ground remembers everything." I hadn't understood then. I wasn't sure I understood now. But I did know the ground had taken him from me. The accident had happened in a storm so fierce the rescue team called it a once-in-a-century disaster. The vehicle he was in had been swept into a rocky gorge. When they retrieved what was left, they said the damage was too severe. Identification was done through what was found in his backpack, his notebook, his ID, the fragments of his phone. I still remember the day they handed me that small evidence bag. Inside was his phone, shattered, warped, drowned. I had pressed it against my forehead and cried in a way that emptied me for years. So how could his voice travel through a dead phone? A gust of wind hit the window, rattling the glass. It brought with it that same tone I had heard in the call, a metallic hum layered inside the wind. I turned toward the sound, heart pounding. No, I had to stop imagining things. But something had changed inside me. Something that had been dead for 20 years was waking up again. Fear, yes, but also something dangerous. Hope. I left the room and grabbed my coat. The sun was rising, carving gold across the sky, but it felt wrong against my skin, too bright for a world that had just shifted under me. I drove to the cemetery. The gravel crunched beneath the tires. Dew clung to the grass like thin silver threads. I walked the familiar path to Caleb's grave, the one I had worn into the earth with years of footsteps. The headstone stood under a lonely oak tree, the same place I had spoken to him countless times before, but today I couldn't speak. I sank to my knees and pressed my palm to the cold stone. "What did they not tell me?" I whispered. The wind answered, with another hum, faint at first, then stronger, vibrating through the branches above. It sounded like static. My breath caught. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail again, this time with the volume at its highest. Caleb's first words came through, as they had before, frightened, broken. But now that the morning was still, and the wind brushed past my ears, I heard it clearly, a new sound buried in the background. Metal striking metal, a distant echo, and beneath it, wind. Not the gentle breeze of the cemetery. No, this wind was harsher, hollow, cavernous, as if rushing through an open space deep underground. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. I pressed my palm harder to the grave, my voice cracking. "Caleb, where are you?" There was no answer, but the hum in the air grew sharper, almost urging. Hope tightened its grip around my throat, because I realized then that the call wasn't a hallucination. It was a message from the edge of a truth I wasn't ready to face but could no longer walk away from. For the rest of that day, I moved like a man caught between two realities. Every logical part of me insisted the call must have been some cruel trick or a glitch, but the voice was what mattered. It hadn't sounded synthesized or imitated. It had sounded tired, human, familiar in the way only a parent could recognize. By late afternoon, the wind began to pick up again. The same uneasy hum threaded through it, the same subtle metallic vibration I heard during the call. It lingered too long to be coincidence. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them standing over a gravestone. I drove toward a small electronics repair shop on the edge of town. The owner, Joel, had known my family for years. He was the one who repaired Caleb's first computer, the one who helped replace my home wiring after the storm, the one who told me the landline phone I kept was old-fashioned but reliable. When I walked in, the bell over the door jangled, and Joel looked up from behind the counter. "Rowan? Haven't seen you in a while. What can I do for you?" I placed my landline handset on the counter. It looked almost ridiculous under the bright fluorescent lights, a dated, beige phone with a yellowing cord. "I need you to check something," I said. Joel pulled out a stool. "What's going on?" I hesitated. How did a man explain something that defied logic? "I received a call last night, from a number that should not exist." My throat tightened. "From my son's number." Joel didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. He simply frowned. "Let me take a look." He plugged the phone into his diagnostic board. Lights blinked across the panel. He checked the circuitry, then the signal memory, and then the call registry. He worked silently, the way he always did when he was concentrating. After a few minutes, he sighed. "Rowan, there's nothing here." "What do you mean?" "I mean there is no record of any incoming call on this line. Nothing between yesterday afternoon and now. No ring voltage spike. No answered connection. No dialing pattern. It's clean." My heart dropped. But the call lasted over 9 minutes. I saw the timestamp. Joel shook his head slowly. "This phone didn't ring, Rowan. Not according to its hardware." I gripped the counter to steady myself. The room felt suddenly smaller. "You think I imagined it?" Joel leaned forward, his voice gentle. "I think you're grieving. And grief does strange things. But I'm not saying you imagined anything. I'm just saying this phone didn't record it." A gust of wind slammed against the shop windows, rattling them in their frames. Joel flinched. "That storm's rolling in fast," he muttered. But it wasn't the storm that made my skin crawl. It was the sound the wind carried, static. The same thin metallic distortion I kept hearing. It hissed against the glass, hummed through the wires overhead. And for a second, just a second, I heard something else inside it. A faint echo. A breath. "Dad." I jerked toward the window so fast, Joel stepped back. "Rowan?" But I couldn't answer. My chest was heaving, my pulse hammering in my throat. It wasn't my imagination. It was him. I pushed away from the counter and grabbed the phone. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely steady. "I need to go." "Go where?" But I was already out the door. The wind whipped my jacket as I stepped into the harsh desert light. The sky had darkened with storm clouds building fast. Dust spun in spirals across the road. And underneath it all, the static grew louder. Not like interference. Not like weather. More like a signal. A message buried in wind and grit and electricity. I stood there for a moment, letting the storm push against me, letting the reality of it settle into my bones. The call wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. Something or someone was reaching out through a channel that shouldn't have been open. And if the phone Joel checked wasn't the source, then the signal was coming from somewhere else, somewhere stronger, somewhere far from town, maybe even somewhere connected to the research site Caleb had been traveling to the day he died. I climbed into my truck, hands shaking. The storm clouds swelled overhead, almost black now. Lightning flashed in the distance, forked and violent. I turned the key. The radio flickered on, then cut out immediately. Then the speakers hissed. Static. And then a whisper. "Dad, please." My entire body went cold. My foot froze on the pedal. The radio screen flickered between dead channels until settling on one with no station number, only a pulsing white line that should not have been possible. The voice came again, fractured but unmistakable. "They didn't tell you the truth." The radio cracked. Then everything went silent again. I sat there, breathless. I wasn't losing my mind. There was only one explanation left, terrifying, impossible, but undeniable. Somewhere out there, beyond what I buried 20 years ago, beyond what I believed was final, my son was still trying to reach me, and the desert wind was helping him speak. By the time I left the electronics shop, the storm that had been gathering over the desert had grown into a heavy, swirling mass of dark clouds. The air smelled of dust and electricity, a scent that always preceded something violent. But the storm wasn't what frightened me. What shook me to the core was the voice on the radio, the whisper that did not belong to this world. If the phone wasn't the source, then the signal had to be coming from somewhere else, somewhere raw, unfiltered, exposed to the elements. Somewhere like the place Caleb had been heading the day he died, the remote research zone that no longer existed on any active map. I hadn't been there since the accident. Authorities sealed the area after the flood destroyed everything. They called it unstable terrain. They called it unsafe. I never argued. Sometimes a father accepts the places the world tells him he should not return to. But today, something deeper than fear pulled me back. I drove for an hour toward the outer road, a long, winding ribbon of cracked asphalt that led nowhere anyone sane would travel. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became. Sand danced across the road in quick, sharp currents. The static returned too, humming faintly through the truck speakers even though the radio was off. At the final paved stretch, the sky cracked with a long, jagged bolt of lightning. I slowed the truck and stared ahead at the dirt path that cut through the desert toward the old site. Faded signs still hung on rusted poles. Restricted area. No entry. Unstable ground. But the wind seemed to whisper beneath the warnings. Dad, here. My throat tightened. My eyes stung. I turned onto the dirt road. The truck's tires slid slightly over loose soil. The path was rough, barely visible in places, but I remembered enough to find my way. The sun was gone now, swallowed by storm clouds. Only the headlights carved a narrow path forward. After a mile or so, I saw remnants of the old research camp. Torn white tarps clung to broken poles, flapping violently in the wind. The remains of metal scaffolds leaned at impossible angles. Empty water tanks lay scattered across the ground like bones picked clean. The deeper I drove, the louder the static became, not through the radio, but through the air itself. It vibrated against the windows, buzzed through the metal frame of the truck. My hands trembled on the wheel. Then I saw it, the gash in the earth. A massive crater-shaped scar, where the flood had torn through 2 decades ago. The desert floor had collapsed inward, leaving a basin of rock, sand, and debris. It looked like something had erupted from beneath, not washed over from above. I parked the truck and stepped out. The wind slammed into me so hard I staggered. Dust stung my eyes. My coat whipped against my legs. I steadied myself and looked down into the crater. For a moment, everything went silent. And then, from the depths of the hollow, came a faint echo, not wind, not thunder. Metal striking metal. The same sound I heard buried in the phone call. I reached into the truck, grabbed my flashlight, and climbed down into the crater. My boots slid on loose rock, but I kept going. The air felt heavy, saturated with cold pockets of wind that rushed past me like whispers. At the bottom, half buried beneath collapsed soil and rusted beams, I found something I had not expected to see. A tunnel, not natural, not formed by erosion. The walls were reinforced with steel plating, twisted now but still intact. The entrance had been swallowed by dirt years ago, but the storm, winds, and shifting ground had revealed enough of it to crawl through. I aimed my flashlight inside. Darkness swallowed the beam almost instantly. But in that darkness, something flickered. A reflection. Metal? A broken panel, wires spilling out of a cracked control box. More debris stretched deeper. Shattered crates, remnants of machinery, fragments of helmets, and protective gear scattered like an abandoned graveyard. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a research path. This was a fully built underground facility, something far more extensive than what they claimed Caleb had gone to study. I crouched, my heart pounding, and crawled into the tunnel. My flashlight illuminated a dusty corridor lined with decayed equipment. It looked like a place left too quickly, abandoned in panic rather than protocol. A faded crate lay at my feet. I brushed off the dust. A name stenciled across it in peeling black letters. Solastra Geologic Division. A company I had never heard of. One that didn't appear in any report. One that Caleb had never mentioned in any of his notes. Thunder boomed overhead, shaking loose particles from the ceiling. I moved deeper. The air smelled metallic, stale, untouched for years. Then my light fell on something that made my knees buckle. A shattered helmet on the ground, and scratched into its cracked surface was a name. C. Hale. My son's name. My lungs seized. I knelt beside it, trembling fingers tracing the letters. My throat closed, and sound escaped me without permission. Caleb. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the tunnel, and for a split second, I saw something at the far end of the corridor. A shadow, tall, still, watching. But when I blinked, it was gone. Only darkness remained. And the static rising again, louder now, vibrating through the very walls around me. My son had not died the way they told me. He had been here. He had been part of something hidden, something dangerous. And whatever happened in this place, it was still reaching for me. Still calling. Still waiting to be uncovered. The silence inside that tunnel was unreal. Not the natural quiet of abandoned places, but a suffocating stillness, as if something had swallowed sound itself. Every breath felt too loud. Every footstep echoed in ways that made my skin crawl. I held the cracked helmet against my chest for a moment, my fingers trembling. The letters on it, C. Hale, felt like a wound reopening. 20 years of grief suddenly folded into a single question that burned through me. Why was his gear here? This was no accident site. This was a sealed, hidden underground structure no one had told me about. The accident report had claimed Caleb was swept away by a flash flood, not trapped underground, not buried in a facility stamped with a company name I'd never heard in my life. I forced myself farther into the tunnel. My flashlight caught broken equipment scattered through the dust, cordless drills half rusted, a collapsed workstation, control panels ripped from their wiring. Everything seemed frozen in the exact moment it was abandoned, desperate, chaotic. A narrow corridor branched off to the left. The walls bore scrape marks, long and jagged, like something had clawed its way along the metal. I swallowed hard and kept my light steady. At the end of the hall, a door hung crooked on one hinge. A faded warning label sat crookedly on the metal. Experimental zone. Authorized personnel only. My breath caught. Experimental? Caleb had been studying geological formations, not working in some kind of classified operation. I pushed the door open with my shoulder. It groaned loudly, echoing down the passage. Inside was a wide chamber with collapsed ceiling beams and shattered energy cells scattered across the floor. But what froze me in place wasn't the equipment. It was the tank. A cylindrical chamber, large enough for a grown man to stand inside, lay shattered against the far wall. Its glass was splintered outward, not inward, as if something had forced its way out. And on the remaining shards, just barely legible, was a faded marker label. Phase memory synchronization. Property of Solastra. My pulse quickened. Memory synchronization. It didn't sound like geology. It didn't sound like anything lawful. A cold breeze cut through the chamber, rattling loose fragments of glass. My flashlight flickered. I stepped closer to the broken tank. Inside, beneath a thick layer of dust, I found something small and square. A data drive. Blue casing, dented along one edge. My fingers shook as I picked it up. As soon as I touched it, the static surged again, this time so loud my ears buzzed. It was coming from the drive itself, vibrating against my palm. Then, a voice. Not through a device. Not through air. Deep inside the static. Dad. I stumbled back, dropping the drive. My heart hammered in my chest. The voice had been unmistakable Caleb's, but not warm like the boy I remembered. It was strained, distorted, like it was trying to break through something too thick to pass. My flashlight flickered violently. Dad, please. I blinked hard, trying to steady my breath. Caleb? Caleb, where are you? Only static, replied rippling, pulsing through the tunnel. Another sound rose under it. Metal. Scraping. Slow, deliberate. My blood ran cold. I turned my flashlight toward the darkened corridor. For a moment I saw nothing. Then movement. something shifting farther down the path. The faint outline of a figure, too still to be human, too tall to be anything I recognized. My instinct screamed at me to run, but another instinct, a parent's instinct, held me where I stood. "Caleb," I whispered again, my voice cracking. "If you can hear me, tell me what happened. Tell me what they did." The static surged once more, rising in volume, swirling around the chamber like a living thing. It filled my ears, pressed against my skull. I dropped to one knee, clutching my head. Then through the chaos his voice broke through again. Not distorted this time. Clear, sharp, terrified. "They lied. Dad, they lied. Don't trust them." "Who? Who lied?" I shouted into the darkness. "Caleb, tell me who!" The static cut off instantly. Silence slammed into the tunnel so hard it made my ears ring. Every hair on my body rose. The quiet felt wrong, like someone had flipped a switch. I forced myself back to my feet, gathering the cracked helmet and the data drive. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't a flood. It wasn't natural. It wasn't a tragedy of nature. It was a cover-up, a deliberate burial of something monstrous. And my son had been caught inside it. I turned and made my way back through the corridor, heart pounding, every muscle tense. The dark shape I'd seen earlier was gone now, but the imprint of its presence lingered, pressing against the back of my neck. Thunder rumbled outside as I climbed out of the crater. The storm was nearly overhead, painting the sky in violent streaks of white and violet. I looked down once more at the helmet in my hand. The crack running through the visor looked almost like a scar. "I'm coming for you," I murmured through clenched teeth. "I promise." But as the wind howled around me, carrying static through the air, I felt something else riding on the storm. Not hope. A warning. Whatever had happened to Caleb, whatever was still happening, it wasn't finished. I drove back toward town with the cracked helmet resting on the passenger seat like a relic dug up from a grave. The data drive lay in my coat pocket, vibrating faintly from time to time, too softly to be mechanical, too irregular to be random. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat, and each one made my grip tighten on the wheel. By the time I reached the outskirts of the business district, the storm had eased. The sky split open just enough for a pale streak of light to fall across the road, but it no longer brought comfort. Not when I finally had proof, physical proof, that Caleb hadn't died the way they claimed. He hadn't drowned in a flash flood. He had been buried, erased, and someone had made sure the truth stayed hidden. The headquarters of the Solastra Corporation, now operating under a slick new name, Helix Core Industries, sat like a monolith of glass and steel against the horizon. Tall windows reflected the dying storm. A receptionist inside greeted me with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No," I said, my voice firm. "But Mason Coyle will want to see me. I'm not leaving until he does." Her expression faltered. Mason Coyle wasn't just an executive. He was the executive Helix Core's regional director, a man whose influence reached far beyond this polished lobby. "One moment, sir," she said, standing slowly. She made a call. When she returned, her face had drained of color. "Mr. Coyle will see you now." Security escorted me to the top floor, two men in black suits who said nothing during the elevator ride. The doors opened to a narrow hall, lined with modern artwork and soft lighting designed to impress visitors. But nothing here impressed me. Not after what I'd seen. Mason Coyle's office was spacious, lined with walnut shelves and glass walls that overlooked the entire region. He stood behind his desk, wearing a navy suit that fit him too perfectly, as if he'd been tailored into the role of authority. "Mr. Hale," he said, smiling with practiced ease. "Please, sit." I didn't sit. Instead, I placed the cracked helmet on the center of his desk. The smile on his face flickered. His eyes dropped to the helmet, first with confusion, then with recognition he couldn't hide. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice too calm. "From the place you buried it," I replied. His jaw tensed. "I went back to the old site," I continued. "The one your company abandoned 20 years ago. The one you claimed had been destroyed beyond recognition. That area is restricted for a reason," he said sharply. "It's unstable." "Unstable?" I leaned forward. "Is that what you call a sealed underground facility, equipped with experimental machinery you never disclosed? Is that what you call a tank labeled phase memory synchronization?" A long silence fell between us. He didn't ask how I knew that term. He didn't pretend confusion. His eyes flicked to the data drive I pulled from my coat pocket, and something inside him shifted. Fear. I also found this. I placed the drive beside the helmet. The room felt instantly colder. Mason, I said slowly. My son's name is on that helmet. He inhaled sharply, barely noticeable, but noticeable enough. Mr. Hale, he began carefully, I understand your loss, but you're treading into areas you do not understand. Areas that, he called me, I interrupted. That froze him. He called me last night. His voice, his number, a number that's been dead for 20 years. Mason's face went pale, colorless, empty, like someone had unplugged all the blood inside him. That's not possible, he said quietly. Yes, I whispered, leaning closer. It is, and you know it. The lights in the office flickered. A distant rumble trembled through the floor as though the storm outside had suddenly returned. But this wasn't thunder. It felt internal, humming faintly through the building's structure like electricity misfiring. Static. Mason straightened slowly, shutting off a small console near his desk with a trembling hand. The lights steadied. The rumbling stopped. What was that? I demanded. He exhaled shakily. Residual activity. From what? I asked, voice low. He closed his eyes, gathering whatever composure he had left. Mr. Hale, your son's research team was not studying geological formations. They were assisting with a classified energy project, a system designed to map and store neural imprints created under extreme environmental stress. It was experimental, dangerous, not approved. My pulse slammed in my ears. Neural imprints? I repeated. You mean consciousness? He didn't speak. Silence was confirmation. A chill crawled down my spine. What happened down there? I asked. Tell me exactly what killed my son. He looked tired for the first time. Human. There was an event, he said. A surge of unstable energy during a phase test. Several subjects were hit. Systems failed. Some anomalies were detected. Signals that shouldn't have existed. After the collapse, we sealed everything to prevent public panic. Panic? I felt fury rise hot in my chest. You buried the truth, I said. You hid my son's death behind paperwork and lies. Mason swallowed hard. No, he said quietly. We didn't hide his death. We hid the fact that he didn't finish the sentence. Because at that moment, a familiar voice crackled through the office speakers. Faint, desperate. Dad, get out. They're listening. The blood drained from my face. Mason's eyes widened in horror. He wasn't expecting that. He wasn't controlling it. The voice came again, louder this time, shaking the glass panels of the office. They're coming. Static exploded through the room like a wave of electricity. The lights died. The windows went black. And for the first time, Mason Coyle looked truly afraid. Not of me, but of something bigger. Something he thought they had buried forever. The office lights flickered back to life, but dimmer, like the building itself had lost confidence in its own power. Mason Coyle stood frozen, his hands braced against the desk, staring at the speaker system, as though it had just spoken in a foreign language. My breathing was uneven. My palms were damp. My son's voice had come through those speakers with the same desperation I heard through the phone, only clearer, closer. Explain, I demanded. But Mason looked shaken enough to collapse. That shouldn't be possible, he whispered. The system has been offline for nearly 2 decades. And yet, I said, my son's voice is still reaching me. Static crackled again across the office, softer this time like a breath. Mason closed his eyes. The neural imprint project was unstable from the beginning, he said. The idea was to capture the electrical pattern of thought during crisis events. But during the surge, something happened. Something we couldn't control. Say it plainly, I snapped. What did you do? His voice dropped. We didn't just record neural signals. We amplified them. My stomach twisted. Amplified. Like an echo trapped in circuitry. Like a memory forced into a loop. Like a human consciousness stretched into places it was never meant to go. I staggered closer to the desk. You're telling me my son is trapped inside one of your machines? I demanded. Mason shook his head quickly. No, Not trapped, not living. But the surge created residual patterns, strong ones, that shouldn't exist. They behave almost like a signal searching for an origin, a desperate loop, with nowhere to go. A cold realization spread through me. Then why is he calling me? Mason finally looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly older, haunted. Because you're the origin, he said. Silence fell so thick it felt like a weight. Everything inside me went cold. Before I could respond, the office lights dimmed again, this time sharply, deliberately, like something was pulling the building's power downward. The speakers came alive once more. Dad, not desperate this time, broken, fragile, as if he were clinging to the last thread of something he barely understood. I stepped forward. Caleb, I'm here. I'm listening. A tremor rolled through the floor beneath us. Papers shifted. The glass windows hummed under a sudden pressure change. Dad, it's dark. I can't see. My heart seized. I know, I whispered. I know, son. Tell me where you are. Static swirl. A glitching distortion. Then words that made every hair on my body stand upright. I'm not alone. Mason paled. Turn it off, he muttered. Turn it off now. But the woman at the front desk wasn't here. No one was. And before Mason could reach the console, the building lights cut out completely. Darkness swallowed the office. A low hum swept through the walls, vibrational, unnatural, as if every wire in the structure was singing the same distorted note. Then, a second voice. Not Caleb's. Lower, metallic, almost like an imitation of a human tone. Phase integrity compromised. Mason lurched backward. No, that system was destroyed. There's nothing left to activate, nothing left to respond. Another pulse of static slammed through the room, stronger than before. My teeth rattled. The glass panels quivered like they might shatter. And then Caleb's voice came back sharper now, urgent. Dad, listen. You have to leave. They're trying to stop the signal. I grabbed the edge of the desk. Caleb, talk to me. Tell me what happened to you. His breathing came through like a tremor. They tried to shut us down, shut the whole project down. But the surge, it put us between places. Us? I whispered. Static swallowed half his next words, but I heard enough. Not just me. My pulse pounded in my ears. There were others, other voices, other lives, other people who hadn't died the way the reports claimed. The building vibrated again, harder. A metallic groan rippled through the ceiling. Mason pressed himself against the wall. This is exactly why we sealed the site. The imprint system creates backflows of energy. It leaks into anything with a conductive source. Phones, wires, speakers. If it gains enough strength, the speaker erupted with a burst of static so violent it forced us both to cover our ears. And over the noise, Caleb screamed. His voice, raw and agonizing. Dad, run. Then, nothing. A silence so sudden and absolute that I felt it in my bones. The power blinked back on in pale strips across the ceiling. The static was gone. The humming was gone. The presence was gone. Caleb was gone. I stood there trembling, trying to steady my breath. My hands were clenched into fists. He's reaching out for help, I said, my voice shaking with fury and grief. And you're telling me to run? Mason finally straightened, his expression changing, less fear now, more resignation. I'm telling you, he said softly, that if you want to bring your son peace, you won't find the answers here. Then where? I demanded. His eyes dropped to the data drive in my pocket. The core station, he said, the last active relay that survived the collapse. My heart stopped. Where is it? He hesitated, then finally spoke the words I both needed and feared. Deep in the old tunnel system. Exactly where your son first called from. The drive back to the old tunnel system felt unreal, like I was moving through a world that had shifted underneath my feet. Mason's final words kept replaying in my mind. The last active relay is where your son first called from, not where he died. Where he called? That single difference changed everything. Night had fallen, and the desert air carried a coldness that sank deeper than the temperature alone. Stars glittered faintly above the ridges, scattered like distant memories. As I drove, the cracked helmet on the passenger seat reflected the moonlight. its jagged crack almost glowing. When I finally reached the crater again, the wind had quieted into a low, trembling hum like it was waiting. I climbed down with the flashlight in one hand and the data drive in the other. The tunnel entrance yawned open, darker now, deeper, as though the earth had inhaled. Inside, the air felt charged, every breath thick with static. I retraced my steps through the collapsed corridor, past the broken tank, past the rusted panels, until I reached a narrow passage. Mason had mentioned a side hall I hadn't noticed before. A faint flicker of red light blinked at the end of it. A power indicator. Still alive after 20 years? My hands trembled as I approached the source. A metal door hung halfway open, revealing a chamber filled with shattered panels and flickering monitors. One console still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. A label sat above it, its letters faded, but readable. Core Resonance Relay. System 01. My breath caught. This was it. The last living piece of the experiment that had taken my son. I stepped toward it, but the air suddenly shifted a pressure drop. A visible ripple in the dust. And then, static. Louder than ever, bursting through the chamber, swirling around me like a storm of invisible sand. My flashlight flickered wildly. "Dad?" His voice trembled through the static. I froze. "Caleb, I'm here. I'm right here." The static pulsed, like the room itself was breathing with him. "You need to listen." His words came broken, fractured. "They erased us, shut down the project, buried the truth." "I know," I whispered. "I found the tank. I found your helmet. I know they lied. Dad, I tried. I tried to get home." The pain in his voice nearly broke me. "But I'm not where you think." The console crackled violently, sparks spitting out. "Where are you?" I pleaded. "Tell me how to find you." A pause, static swelling. Then, "I'm between." The word hit me like a strike to the chest. "Between?" I whispered. "Between what?" "Between here and the surge. Between the memory loop and the moment I—" His voice cracked like splintering glass. "The moment I died." I felt the world tilt. My knees weakened. "Dad, I didn't make it out," he whispered. "Not the way you hoped." Tears blurred my vision. "Then how are you speaking to me? How did you call?" "Because the surge, it captured everything," he said. "Thought, fear, my last moment. It kept echoing. And the relay, it keeps trying to send me home." My lips trembled. "Caleb, are you still alive? Anywhere?" Another long silence. "No," he whispered finally. "Not anymore." The ache in my chest tore open. "But your love, your voice, gave me a way to reach you." I pressed a hand against the metal console to stay upright. "Son, I'm so sorry. For everything you went through. For not knowing." "You couldn't have known," he said softly. "They made sure you couldn't." The wind outside howled, echoing through the tunnel. "But listen, Dad," he continued. "The relay is failing. The signal won't hold much longer." Panic surged through me. "There must be something I can do. Tell me. I'll shut all of this down. I'll expose them. No," he whispered. "I don't want you trapped in this, in the in-between like I was." His voice softened, trembling like a child's. "I just needed to say goodbye." A sob tore from my throat. No, not again. I already lost you once." "You didn't lose me," he whispered gently. "You carried me. All this time. You kept my compass. You kept my room. I heard you. Every time you spoke to my grave, I heard you." My legs buckled. I sank to the floor, crying into the darkness. "I love you, Dad. I love you too," I choked out. "More than anything." Static exploded in one final surge, everything glowing, the air vibrating, the console sparking violently. "Thank you for coming back for me, Caleb." Then, silence. The relay's lights dimmed. One flicker. Another. Gone. And with it his voice. I sat in the dark for a long time. Maybe minutes. Maybe an hour. The room felt empty now, not haunted, not charged. Just still. Peaceful. Almost. When I finally stood, I carried the data drive and helmet out of the tunnel with me. The sky was beginning to lighten, the earliest edge of dawn brushing against the desert ridge. I climbed to the top of the crater and knelt in the sand. I placed the compass beside me, its needle trembling before settling at last. Next to it, I set the small recorder I carried in my coat, the one I used for my work. I pressed play. A message I recorded days ago whispered back, "For my son, I will never stop searching." The irony was unbearable and beautiful at once. I pressed stop. Then for a long time, I watched the sunrise spill across the desert, warm and golden, soft, forgiving. And in the wind, quiet, faint, but unmistakably familiar, I heard my son's voice one last time. Home. Not a cry, not a plea, just a whisper of peace. I closed my eyes, because the truth was finally clear. Some losses break us. Some losses remake us. And some losses teach us that love reaches farther than the world ever allows. Even into the static. Even into the dark. Even into the in-between. My son was gone, but he was not lost. Not anymore.